Colonel North, in your work at the NSC, were you not assigned at one time to work on plans for the continuity of government in the event of a major disaster?
Mr. Chairman.
I believe that question touches upon a highly sensitive and classified area, so may I request that you not touch upon that, sir.
One of the programs that got exposed during Iran-Contra was Rex 84. And Congressman Jack Brooks, in those hearings, brought up the fact that in reality, FEMA was a cover for a huge continuity of government program in case the American people ever rebelled, and that was the architecture or the blueprint for the illegitimate shadow government to fully take over the functions of the entire federal government, suspend the Constitution, suspend the Bill of Rights, and arrest whoever they wanted to. And FEMA was going to control the camps that the people were going to be put into. And FEMA would be the main governmental institution with different directors over every agency. And now when you watch FEMA on television, it's always a colonel or a general or an admiral in uniform who's over the different departments.
The martial law portions of Rex 84 were outlined in a 1982 memo written by FEMA Deputy John Brinkerhoff. Martial law was to be declared in the event of a national crisis, yet the plan did not define the term national crisis. The plan allowed FEMA to take control of both federal and state governments, appointing military commanders to replace duly elected officials. The plan also called for the rounding up of at least 21 million American Negroes for delivery to numerous military bases converted into prison centers, also known as FEMA relocation camps. Why? Because at that time, African Americans were classified as one of the largest threats to the continuity of the federal government. Who does the federal government consider the biggest threat these days?
The convergence of globalization and technology has created a new brand of terrorism. There were persons who, for whatever reason, came to view their home country as the enemy.
The kind of right-wing, religious-based domestic terrorism.
Disturbing news tonight about homegrown terror.
Part of this is big change in the White House, a new cultural experience, and some of the crazies are coming out of their closet.
Right now, it looks like there is no connection between the men arrested and any known terrorist cell. Homegrown. Homegrown, I should say.
Folks, we've got a very serious situation here. I'm holding what is called the right-wing extremism, current economic and political climate, fueling resurgence and radicalization and recruitment. And in it, we talked about the fact that they define pro-lifers as domestic terrorists. They put this in a Department of Homeland Security document, this official assessment, now saying pro-lifers, people that believe in end-time prophecies, people that are opposed to the administration's position on immigration, those of us that are standing up for the sanctity of life and for the sanctity of marriage, all of those are now potential, and this is what they're saying, domestic terrorists.
It's a terrorist next door that could be our bigger threat.
They call people who believe in the sanctity of life, who believe in owning firearms, who believe in serving their country in the military and coming back, who are very concerned about the policies that this nation is embarking on, spending too much money, taxing too much. It's all listed right here. These are the domestic right-wing extremists.
1 million names under the watchful eye of the United States. America's so-called terrorist watch list has hit the record number, according to one of the country's most prominent civil liberties groups.
That's a lot of people to keep track of. They're adding new people all the time.
It's a secret list that you don't know really quite how one gets on, and you don't know how you get off.
Would you like to see all the executive orders that have been put into place to take over our nation, to have complete control over us, to take away our rights, round us up, and put us where they want us? Here we go. Executive Order 10990 allows the government to take over all modes of transportation and control of all highways and seaports. Executive Order 10995 allows the government to seize and control the communication media. Executive Order 10997 allows the government to take over all electrical power, gas, petroleum, fuels, and minerals. Executive Order 10998 allows the government to seize all means of transportation, including personal cars, trucks, or vehicles of any kind, and total control over highways, seaports, and waterways. Executive Order 10999 allows the government to take over all food resources and farms. Executive Order 11000 allows the government to mobilize civilians into work brigades under government supervision. Executive Order 11001 allows the government to take over all health, education, and welfare functions. Executive Order 11002 designates the Postmaster General to operate a national registration of all persons. Executive Order 11003 allows the government to take over all airports and aircraft, including commercial aircraft. Executive Order 11004 allows a Housing and Finance Authority to relocate communities, build new housing with public funds, designate areas to be abandoned, and establish new locations for populations. Executive Order 11005 allows the government to take over railroads, inland waterways, and public storage facilities. Executive Order 11051 specifies the responsibility of the Office of Emergency Planning and gives authorization to put all executive orders into effect in times of increased international tensions and economic or financial crisis. Executive Order 11310 grants authority to the Department of Justice to enforce the plans set out in executive orders, to institute industrial support, to establish judicial and legislative liaison, to control all aliens, to operate penal and correctional institutions, and to advise and assist the President. Executive Order 11049 assigns emergency preparedness function to federal department and agencies, consolidating 21 operative executive orders issued over a 15-year period. Executive Order 11921 allows the Federal Emergency Preparedness Agency to develop plans to establish control over the mechanisms of production and distribution of energy sources, wages, salaries, credit, and the flow of money in U.S. financial institution in any undefined national emergency. It also provides that when a state of emergency is declared by the President, Congress cannot review the action for 6 months. The Federal Emergency Management Agency has broad powers in every aspect of the nation. General Frank Salzito, chief of FEMA's Civil Security Division, stated in a 1983 conference that he saw FEMA's role as a new frontier in the protection of individual and governmental leaders from assassination and of civil and military installations, from sabotage and or attack, as well as prevention of dissident groups from gaining access to U.S. opinion or a global audience in times of crisis. FEMA's powers were consolidated by President Carter to incorporate the National Security Act of 1947 that allows for strategic relocation of industries, services, government, and other essential economic activities, and to rationalize the requirements for manpower, resources, and production facilities. The 1950 Defense Production Act gives the President sweeping powers over all aspects of the economy. The Act of August 29, 1916 authorizes the security of the Army in time of war to take possession of any transportation system from transporting troops, material, or any other purpose related to the emergency. The International Emergency Economic Powers Act enables the President to seize the property of a foreign country or national. These powers were transferred to FEMA in a sweeping consolidation in 1979.
This is it. You're on a bike. Okay, the goal is using the green mask of environmental concern. The two parts of Agenda 21 are imposed, and that is smart growth, high-density development, moving populations into controlled city centers where they can be monitored, controlled, and surveilled, and the other part, the Wildlands Project. Wildlands. Getting people off the rural land, blocking access to wilderness roads and resources, and shifting land ownership from private to public. And then when it's in public hands, it can be then shifted into other private hands. conglomerates, large corporations. So that's the way, this is how it's done. In Europe, all the nations made local Agenda 21 plans. All nations. And by the way, if you check out our website, Post Sustainability Institute, you'll find the link to the United Nations where you can actually find your own country, find the plans, find, this was updated, the UN updated it, don't worry about it, I'll give you the information, don't write it down now. What it was that the United Nations recorded those plans and actually had everything together on their websites up until about 1997. So you'll see, from 1992 to 1997, and yes, Denmark is on there, and you can check it out. So, for instance, here in Denmark, let's just take Denmark. In the year 2000, the Danish Planning Act was amended to commit all municipalities to the development of local Agenda 21 strategies. In, the Earth Summit was, every 5 years. So in Johannesburg in 2002, what was the goal there? Broadening the role and capacity of local authorities in implementing Agenda 21. Here in Denmark, you've got the Aalborg Agreement in 1994. Aalborg plus 10, 2004, founded the European Local Action 21 Roundtable, public-private partnerships. Fascism. Yeah, that's one of the best ways. That's how do you implement this? You use the corporations which pressure the government, work together funding the non-governmental organizations which pressure the government, and then you have people that are shifting from one role to the other. Well, they go out of office and now they're the head of whatever the environmental group is, and then they move from there into another elected position, and this is how your policies are changed. In 2012 was the 20th anniversary of Agenda 21, right? Rio plus 20. And in Rio de Janeiro, what was the deal there? Strengthening the role of major groups, non-governmental organizations. What did they do there? They say it's a failure. If you check it out with the UN, they're going to tell you, oh, that failed. We really screwed. They always tell you they failed. They always tell you they failed in their plans because they don't want you to freak out. Yes, we achieved our goal. So, strengthening the role of major groups, what did they do? They made $500 billion in agreements between non-governmental organizations, foundations, corporations, and governments at that time. The World Business Council for Sustainable Development, who's on that? Monsanto. GM, Sony, DuPont. How about those seeds, huh? Okay, so what you have here, you've got however you set up your representative government, but in the states we've got city, county, state, and federal. What do they all have in common? They're all elected by you. Now, yeah, they may not represent you, and you might not be happy about it, and you might need a whole heck of a lot of money to get in there, and things are very seriously messed up. But you still have the illusion of electing them, and at your local level, you are making policy and electing those officials. But what is this? Think about this. Global, regional, neighborhood. What do they have in common? Not representative. You do not elect any of those positions. And that is what we are shifting to. So, if you raise your voice against this, you're a dissenter, right? Communitarianism. Land use and land ownership restrictions are vital to this plan because they make regionalization possible. And here's what Ernst Huber, the official Nazi Party spokesman, said about this in 1933. Here's the official Nazi policy on land. All property is common property. The owner is bound by the people and the Reich to the responsible management of his goods. His legal position is only justified when he satisfies this responsibility to the community. Zbigniew Brzezinski, I think it's ended in 33. Zbigniew Brzezinski is the former national security advisor to President Carter. In 1995, 3 years after Agenda 21 was agreed to, he said, We cannot leap into world government in one quick step. The precondition for eventual globalization, true globalization, genuine globalization, is progressive regionalization. Because thereby we move towards larger, more stable, more cooperative units, like the EU. Started as a trade agreement. This is how it works. Globalization, if you don't take anything else from this, think about this. Globalization is the standardization of systems. Standardization, you're going to see it as harmonization, homogeneity, uniformity. Hey, you can't control systems that don't match up. Systems refer to the legal system, the educational system, healthcare, markets, land use, law enforcement. Do you know about fusion centers? Fusion centers? My goodness, I must be somewhere else. I must not be in the United States. They must not tell you that what they're doing now with law enforcement is integrating, militarizing your local police force, integrating it with your state police, your military, Interpol, the entire world is being completely integrated. Fusion centers, FBI, CIA, all of your records, everything. You cannot fall into those little cracks anymore. Can't happen anymore. Total, seamless information awareness, total awareness. So, globalization is the process of developing worldwide uniformity in social, political, economic, and environmental controls. That's what it is. That's globalization. It's the rise of the city-state. Okay? This is how you do it. That's what regionalization is the rise of the city-state. You're going to lose nations. Now, I'm not, I don't really have time to talk about nationalism. But what I want to say is that the smaller the unit, the more power you have. If you're regionalized and you have 200 representatives sitting on they're elected, but they're sitting on an unelected board making policy. And let's just say this room, we are all representing some town or some state or some nation. How much voice do we have? Who listens to us? And how much power do we have? So I'm going to show you the new map of the United States of America. And you may not be able to see this very well. We have 50 states in the United States, but this is mega-regions. 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 Mega, large. Mega-regions. These are the city-states. These are large cities that are being made larger. Now remember I told you that the gray area is the wildlands. That's going to be the area that no one will have access to. And I haven't told you anything about myself. I was a legal witness, an expert witness in land use and land valuation for my government, for the State Department of Transportation. Expert witness, testified in court. And I found out about this because I saw that people were not being able to use their land. And I looked behind that and I found Agenda 21. This is true. Okay? The federal government of the United States is doing this, is in process of creating mega-regions, which are essentially crossing national boundaries. This is Cascadia. It used to be a portion of Washington State, Oregon State, Idaho, and Vancouver area, British Columbia in Canada. The Southern California and Texas Triangle areas include part of Mexico. This breaks national boundaries, it breaks state boundaries, it breaks county boundaries. It's also a project of the Ford Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation. Regionalization and world government. You use trade agreements to destroy boundaries, and you actually cannot make local law that breaks those treaties. Okay, you standardize the law, you relocate populations and jobs. We've got the Trans-Pacific Partnership coming up. in the United States and the Pacific Rim, and about to come in December is the Transatlantic Trade Investment Partnership with the EU and the United States. The United Nations policy on land use was established in 1976, and it says land. You know, first of all, let me just tell you, if you think nobody owns anything, and hey, aren't we all just cool? This is just the world, this is just life, and oh, nobody can really own anything, and no one's free. I am sorry. That is not true. We do have ownership. We have ownership of this. Our ownership extends to those things that we value. Now, when that is taken away from us by, as I said, you know, birds are not free from the chains of the skyway, but I do not wish to be chained by any man. Now, here is the land use policy of the United Nations. It says land can't be treated as an ordinary asset controlled by individuals and subject to the pressures and inefficiencies of the market. No, private land ownership is a principal accumulation instrument for accumulating wealth and concentrating wealth, and therefore it contributes to social injustice. Public control of land use is therefore indispensable. And what does that mean? It means that right now in the San Francisco Bay Area, we are fighting a huge plan that merges 9 counties and 101 cities into a single unit. Our group, my group, is suing to stop this. These plans are all over the United States. They regionalize the area, and most people have no idea that they exist. Most people are completely unaware that they will have no power to determine if they can use their land or not. If you bought a nice piece of land to retire on and you want to build a house on it later, you'll find that if you're outside of a 4% land area in the San Francisco Bay Area, 4%, that you cannot build on it. 100% of the structures in rural areas outside of the urban centers in the San Francisco Bay Area has to be rural. 100%. You want to build a house out there? No. You can't do that. Now, these plans are the same plan all over the world. I've got, well, here's the local county below me, just south of me, and they have the logo for United Nations Agenda 21 right in their land use plan. The San Francisco plan is the same plan as the Hanoi Capital Regional Plan 2030, Hanoi, Vietnam. So land use plans are used to change and craft the physical built environment. Where and how you live really determines your life. So this cult of new urbanism is a war on rural people. Rural people. That's what you're going to find, because what do corporations want? They want a mobile workforce. They want a release of all regulation on moving products across boundaries. They don't want boundaries. And they want low wages. So if you're low wages, so if you're living in a high-density apartment in the city center, you don't have any land around you, you're in an apartment, you rent it, you are a mobile person, you can be moved from one place to the other where the jobs are, you can be easily moved, and your wages can be low because you do not have a vehicle, you've got a bicycle. It's a lot cheaper to move you around, and you can be more easily surveilled because you have no private space. Here we go. This is it. When you restrict single-family home development and you consolidate populations into tight urban centers, you're going to devastate land ownership and land use. And that's nationwide. In China, they've got the so-called ghost cities. Do you know about those? They're building, everybody's like, gee, I wonder what they're doing that for. Gosh, nobody's living there, and there are all these big, tall buildings that they just built. I wonder, oh, okay, now we know. They're moving the rural populations in there against their will. They're relocating the rural populations against their will into these city centers that are built with full surveillance capability. All right? London, Berlin, Milan, other EU cities all across the world, this high-density apartment block construction is happening often with government subsidies, very often with government subsidies. So, the Wildlands Project. the Wildlands Project is, hey, this is a map of North America. You notice it has no boundaries on it because animals don't know where the boundaries are. The idea is that swaths of land will be identified, huge sections. I mean, I don't know how well you can see this, maybe not too well. This is a project of the World Resources Institute and the Wildlands Network. It's being implemented through the United States Environmental Protection Agency. This is about creating areas that are huge corridors for animal movement. The spine of the continent takes out about 12 states, goes down through most of Mexico and comes up all the way to Alaska. The idea is that, what? The idea is to remove humans and human activity from rural and suburban areas. Agenda 21 is rural cleansing. When you have fires, is it produced through HAARP? Possibly. When you have fires, when you have floods, when you're looking at tremendous devastation like you've never seen before, oh no, we're not going to let you back in there to rebuild your house, because you were living in a national forest and we bought that land all around you, and now we want you out of there. Why? Because wilderness. What is wilderness identified as? What is wilderness? You think you know, you go out and you take a walk and you think you're in wilderness. Wilderness is an area where the earth and its community of life are untrammeled by man, where man himself is a visitor who does not remain. That's wilderness. That's what wilderness is. Urban people do not understand rural life. Urban people don't understand farming. There's a total disconnect. How do you get pushed off your land in the rural areas? They monitor your well. They restrict your access. They pulverize your roads to gravel. They stop your postal service. They take away your schools. They don't maintain your bridges. And pretty soon, you're the only one out there paying taxes, and you just can't keep doing it anymore.
You know, when you first heard it, you were like, come on, that's conspiracy. Because, I mean, who names something Agenda 21? I mean, when I flew into the Seattle airport one night, and the Department of Homeland Security actually paints their helicopters, I'm not kidding, black. And I'm like, come on, guys. Really, you've got actual black helicopters? So I didn't believe it. And we started doing our research, and it's so overwhelmingly out in the open, you can't believe that nobody else is looking.
For everyone here tonight not familiar with Agenda 21, I would suggest that this is the beginning of your learning curve, not the end.
Good evening, I'm Rosa Corey. I'm the Executive Director of the Post-Sustainability Institute. And I'm glad to be here tonight. It's an important night because we're drawing something out of the shadows. And it's important to talk about it. It's not a conspiracy theory, it's a conspiracy fact. This is Agenda 21. This is the United Nations plan. It's a 300-page, 40-chapter plan. And ICLEI was created in 1990 prior to this plan's adoption to implement United Nations Agenda 21, Sustainable Development worldwide. Sustainable development is a term that was defined by the United Nations, and all of these terms come out of the United Nations. Smart growth is part of the United Nations Agenda 21. Your general plan elements are designed in accordance with United Nations Agenda 21 principles. The plan restricts your choices, it limits your ability to govern yourself, and it takes away your freedom. This seems like a rhetorical statement, but it really is not. This is actually what this plan does. And using the cover of environmental concern, our private property rights and our civil rights have been diminished, and they will continue to be so unless we call a halt to it. ICLEI is the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, but it changed its name so that you wouldn't know that it's international. It seems like all of these things seem like they sound so good. Sustainable development, green, vibrant, walkable, bikeable. You know, how could you be against that? But really, when you know about this plan, it is really very serious.
Did you know that there's regional plans all across the nation right now that are being rolled out that are all exactly the same? They're all in alignment with the principles of UN Agenda 21. And ICLEI is their agent. An NGO is an affiliate of the United Nations. That's what that means. They're not part of this government. They're outside, coming from outside of our nation. And they don't have the best interests of Americans at heart.
What they're going for is 11 regions in North America, not states, not our 50 states, 11 regions. They will be appointing people to do the planning and the running and the operation of those regions through the United Nations.
The International Council of Local Environment is an oxymoron to me. What does the International Council have to do with our local environments?
On the ICLEI website, it says 200 local governments from 43 countries convened at our inaugural conference, the World Congress of Local Governments for Sustainable Future at the United Nations in New York. I think there's a connection. Wouldn't you agree, Mr. Mora?
I am patently against ICLEI and Agenda 21, and I urge the city, as a resident, to withdraw your membership. That's not to say give up your green programs. That's not to say give up striving to have a better environment. But disconnect from this organization.
Here is the Local Agenda Planning Guide, ICLEI. Local Agenda Planning Guide, ICLEI. If you open this up, it's from Maurice Strong. It talks about the United Nations. It talks about Agenda 21. This is it. You cannot deny that they are not connected.
Former President of the United States, George Bush Sr. said, effective execution of Agenda 21 will require a profound reorientation of human society, unlike anything the world has ever experienced. A major shift in the priorities of both governments and individuals, and an unprecedented redeployment of human and financial resources. Dixie Ray, former Washington State Governor and Assistant Secretary for Oceans and International Environmental and Scientific Affairs, stated, Agenda 21 seeks to establish a mechanism for transferring the wealth from citizens to the third world. Fear of environmental crisis would be used to create a world government and UN central direction. This segment of our society, who fear one world government and UN invasion, through which our individual freedoms will be stripped away, would actively work to defeat any elected official who joined the conspiracy by undertaking Agenda 21. So we will call our process something else. We will call it comprehensive planning or growth management or smart growth. We ended up with sustainable development.
Sustainable development has become the popularized expression for Agenda 21. Agenda 21 is the 1992 United Nations Rio Declaration on the Environment and Development.
It is the agenda for the 21st century you're living in today. For a brave new world where everything that you cherished and held true will no longer exist.
Agenda 21 defines itself as the comprehensive plan of action to be taken globally, nationally, and locally by organizations of the United Nations systems.
It also elevates nature above man. And it contains something called the precautionary principle, where basically you're guilty until you're proven innocent.
Sustainable development is the philosophy designed to bring human beings across the globe under the full control of a narrow human elite.
It's a 40-chapter document to basically control the world. It's based entirely on socialist control mechanisms.
Sustainable developers have designed a global movement coordinated through a global to local action plan to create world government in accordance with certain objectives. The focus of sustainable development is the abolition of private property, societal undermining of the family, and abandonment of the constitutional protection of unalienable rights as described in the Declaration of Independence. You see, I sat on the Santa Cruz Agenda 21 committees. Now, this was a lot of crazy ideas. This was back in the mid-90s. Crazy ideas I heard. Mother Earth's surface wasn't to be scratched. Human beings were to be concentrated into human settlement zones. Educational systems were to focus on the environment as the central organizing principle. All aspects of life were covered. Well, I went to these committees at the request of some people who told me that I needed to understand what was going on, and I came back and I said, this is craziness. This is so silly. It has no chance of having any effect on our society. Well, I was wrong. The United States government's support for Sustainable Development, Agenda 21, is very clear. In 1992, while the Rio Conference was going on, George Bush, then president, was there, where he executed the Agenda 21 protocols on behalf of the United States and brought it back to Washington, D.C. Within a year, Bill Clinton, by executive order, no congressional review, established the President's Council for Sustainable Development. In Santa Cruz, we've got a 2-lane freeway system. We need 4. But what we're getting is hundreds of millions of dollars of federal money to take a dilapidated rail line that Southern Pacific wants to put in the hands of somebody else so that a commuter line can be built along the railroad track. That'll be followed by 14-story buildings where people will live and stack them and pack them units, where developers or so-called sustainable developers will build these high-rises with federal dollars. It's a partnership between selected developers building this new world order and the government using the American taxpayer dollars in order to do it. This is a map of the Wildlands Project. To explain the map, the red are areas that are to be off limits to human beings. No resource development, no human activity. If you live there, you won't.
Coming up, if you don't live in a major metro area, you might want to pack your bags. Years ago, moving to the suburbs was a sign that you were making a better life for yourself and your family. But our next guest details a government report suggesting there may be a long-term plan to change all that for you. The effort to, quote, Manhattanize America. If you live in the suburbs, don't get too comfy. Our next guest says the Obama administration has plans to push Americans slowly but surely out of the burbs and into the big cities as a means to, quote, spread the wealth around.
The yellow areas are the areas for major control of all human activity. If you live there, you won't. The black areas, the black dots, are the smart growth zones. That's where human beings are to be stacked and packed in small living units along rail tracks.
Notice, the barbed wire faces in, not out. Alright, we're going to go ahead and get out here. Take a look at this a little closer. Stick with me. Okay. And these buildings are pretty massive. They could hold a whole lot. Basically, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way down there. There's another one over there and one in front of that. So there's 6 big buildings. And then you notice each of the doors are numbered. W01, W02, W03, with warehouse being labeled E-211. And again, if you get a closer look at the barbed wire here, you can see the railroad tracks that go on the sides of all the buildings.
and it's pretty much been covered by a lot of people. You see the sign out there, hopefully, that says Homeland Security for the T. Don Hutto Residential Center. And so there it is. It's been designated as a FEMA camp in time of civil unrest or declared emergency.
A stockpile of military vehicles were recently discovered occupying a secluded commercial property on the outskirts of Las Vegas, at the address of 5750 Sky Point Drive. It doesn't seem as if the Humvees and other military-grade vehicles are for sale, even though they are stationed at a former car dealership that has been stripped of its business logo and signs. It would appear as if the equipment is deliberately being hidden from the public on this secluded property surrounded by barbed wire fences. The front of the building, which can be seen while driving north on Interstate 95 while departing from Vegas, is littered with pedestrian vehicles. After closer investigation, it was clear that the former United Dodge dealership is some sort of military station, judging from the soldiers on the property all dressed and outfitted in army fatigues. However, there is no clear indication or signage posted certifying that it is a United States military base. One 18-year-old boy named Jonathan, who lives in the area, proclaimed the military has been there for 6 months now. His friends added, "We think it's a secret undercover operation or military base."
Charlotte Iserby, I owe you an apology. I did not believe for the longest time it was a deliberate dumbing down. I thought the dumbing down was a natural consequence of a bad idea. Folks, it's deliberate. It's deliberate.
The sustainable globalist goal is the orchestration of a planned fall of American principles, values, and lifestyles. The effect on the average American will be devastating. With modernizing technology, the ordinary person will live without independence, privacy, or substantive rights.
This government has been working overtime to take away our rights to common law through many pieces of legislation. Common law is what guarantees us an ability to correct injustices. This coming year, I promise you, you will also hear debate over a number of pieces of legislation that will further erode our common law rights. And you have to get behind me on this, ladies and gentlemen, to stop this from going through. As Agenda 21 became more and more apparent to me, I began using the line in Parliament that government was now declaring war on its own citizens. And that goes back as far as 2008. This, of course, led me to being labelled a conspiracy theorist. But here we are now, openly talking about Agenda 21 and the ramifications we will see in a short period of time if this is not stopped in its tracks. The environmental crisis will be the international disaster that will unlock the new world order, one world government.